ai ka maunua ka ua. Paai ko au ke ahoa ka ua. E a e kukua kua I ka moana nei la Lapai ka I kuvai lai e ku e paai ai paa kai a ka uai.
The ancient Hawaiians held personal ceremonies for the many varieties of fish they caught. The petition to Ku'ula, a deified fishing ancestor, would be for an abundant catch, or upon return from fishing, thanking Ku'ula for the provisions. However, the ʻōpelu and aku rituals were reserved for the large and stately temples referred to as luakini heiau. Over the last 2 centuries, Hawaii's political landscape evolved the way people interacted with ecosystems. With newcomers came the introduction of new philosophies and lifestyles which almost caused a total extinction of the ancient wisdoms. It is at Hikio, a luakini heiau at Kealakekua Bay in South Kona on the island of Hawaii, where the offerings are made and the ancient deities are called upon through a set of protocols that established and proclaimed the kapu for many centuries. Today, rituals such as the kuapola continue during the start of the makahiki season and are observed only by a few native Hawaiian families. Some regions in Hawaii observed 3 seasons: Ho'oilo, typically the wet season; Kauela, the hot and humid season; and then there was Makali'i, or Makahiki. The kuapola ceremony initializes the makahiki season, during which time the priests would prepare the image of Lonomakua to preside over the ceremonies during this time of the year. The 4-month-long season lasted from the months of Ikua to Kaulua, correlating between the months of October through February. Makahiki is a time to observe, as well as a period where human activity is minimized to allow for resources to replenish. The spawning cycles of ʻōpelu and aku consecrated the pu'uokuapola rites, and in turn it proclaimed the kapu, or regulations, on gathering the 2 most important fish in the Hawaiian society. Harvesting the aku fish starts off the traditional new year in the month of Ka'elo, corresponding to the Gregorian calendar months of January and February, at which time the ʻōpelu spawn and the babies gather closer to shore, and the kapu now prohibits the taking of ʻōpelu until Kauela, or the summer months, arrive and the ceremonies of the kapu switch the prohibition from ʻōpelu to aku.
Seasons run from February to the summertime. February, all the younger ʻōpelu come in and we start swarming out here in the course. There's all the big ones come in.
A story of the high priest Pa'ao from the South Pacific Islands shares its beginnings of how the aku and ʻōpelu fish impacted society for many centuries. And a kapu was imposed because of his relationship to the school of fish that guided the journey from Kahiki to Hawaiʻi.
His connection to the fish is because on his way, on one of his journeys from south coming here, his navigator dies on board the ship, and then they're kind of stranded without anyone with the the real training, the real skill to bring them to land again. So they're kind of stranded, and it's one of the schools of this iʻa that comes up that they find while they're out at sea, and they're able to follow that school, and that brings them into sight of land. And the land they sight is actually down in Ka'u. They sight Mauna Loa, Kilauea, and Kalai area. So that's where they come in, they find the island, and they're able to land. Anyway, I believe that because of that, there was a tradition of respecting the kapu over the akule, the aku, the ʻōpelu, that really came into the heiau because of that.
For many generations, the ancient kapu system upheld the strict seasonal harvest. However, over time, governing systems changed, and eventually the luakini, or stately temples, were closed and even prohibited as Christianity dominated society. Focus was emphasized on constitutions and legislations, and Native Hawaiian traditions were given less consideration or even scoured upon. Many academic sources would claim that the kapu system has ended, but has it disappeared?
We generally have this thinking that, the kapu system ended, but I think more and more, especially with more cultural practitioners, diving into their regional place-based knowledge, we're starting to understand that the kapu wasn't a blanket that covered the entire islands. Yeah, every place had certain kapus, and some kapus continued for periods of time. Some came in phases. You observe them for a certain amount of time, then you see them end. So now that we're starting to kind of understand how these systems worked, it's becoming possible for us to reapply these terminologies and these practices to our lives today.
Foreign influences and industries threatened the resources and changed the livelihood of natives. As far back as 1950, the community voices urged the state government to conduct studies that would analyze the negative impacts of the aku and ʻōpelu. It is a testament that the kapu continues to be a way of life for Native Hawaiians to this day, yet not being supported by the current government system to ensure the resource is viable for perpetuity.
Kanaka Maoli were incredibly organized in terms of government, administration, management of resources. And of course, that's not a very popular opinion nowadays, that, we've kind of been portrayed as more of Kanaka Maoli are indigenous people, they're primitive and this and that. But as native knowledge, native intelligences are starting to be more recognized, I think it's important that Western systems of management have to be influenced and brought into balance by place-based, indigenous knowledge-based systems of management as well.
Traditional knowledge is imperative, and present-day policymakers, community developers, government agencies are slow to include traditional knowledge in their process. When asked generational fisherman Uncle Akemi of Ho'okena, South Kona, should the state government step in to strengthen and enforce the kapu?
You should now, because there are less ʻōpelu out there. We've been seeing all these years, it's depleting. We don't see them anymore. Before you used to have hundreds out there. You just can go out there, come back in. You go out there, you can be out there all day without filling up a cooler.
eventually you'll have a system that should be able to, to manage itself, to regulate itself. Whether that means you have people that have to go out and check what fishermen are doing, or what the gathering practices are, whether that involves people, communities just regulating themselves. I don't know. There's conversations that have to be had.
The ʻōpelu, who were chosen to sit with kupuna to receive traditional knowledge, were given the opportunity to hōʻike, or showcase what they learned, and engage the community to participate in some of the practices and knowledge they learned. Here we have Malachi, a 16-year-old generational resident of Kealakekua Bay, spent several years with notable kupuna fishermen, Uncle Chuck Leslie of Kealakekua Bay. Malachi was able to share techniques as well as share how to respect the ocean with his community at the annual Makahiki Ohana Day in Kealakekua Bay. However, as the next generation assumes their responsibilities to uphold centuries of traditions, the uncertainty for the future of the fish resources weighs heavier now than ever before.
How do you see the future of ʻōpelu fishing?
It's going to be hard, I would say, because unless we kind of start and let them get bigger. If not, it wouldn't last.
They're just gonna go away completely.
Yeah, that's going to be just little quantity for anybody.
Oh.
Yeah, like couple months you see nothing at all at the stores. Yeah, what happened to ʻōpelu? Oh, nobody catching. It's not there. If you're not there, you cannot catch nothing.
Within the last 5 decades, fishermen have grave concerns about the viability of ʻōpelu. The need to address issues such as climate change and extracting industries in community meetings and legislation are now synonymous to the petitions for kuʻula. Rock sinkers that were passed down for many generations are drying up and are becoming historic relics in museums instead of tools for harvesting food. A newly hatched school of ʻōpelu begins their migration towards safer areas near the shore, where they gather around the ko'a. A ko'a can be found where coral naturally grows, or where fishermen would construct an area out of coral near the shore to support the tiny fish population from predators, and a place where food is provided until they are ready for harvesting size. Landmarks that can be spotted when out at sea are used as ko'a, and oftentimes small fishing shrines on the land would be aligned to where fish migrate and are fed seasonally by the fishermen until harvest season begins.
In order for catch ʻōpelu, we need to go out there every day and just feed them. As long as we feed them and train them where at the course, and we train them where to feed every day. You can have 10, 15 cores, but we feed all the cores, and so you always go out there, they're always out there. We're waiting for somebody to come and feed them.
What do you guys use to prepare or to catch the ʻōpelu?
Well, we use taro. We scrape the taro, pumpkin, and avocado. We mix all that, but we need to cook all that down to make it soft. Because you use pumpkin because when you scrape it with the scraper, it looks kind of like wiggly, like shrimps. When you scrape it and you cook them, and you come them out, it's still like small fish. And even for the taro, it's kind of transparent, so they think it's small fish. So that's why they feed on that. Could be the water is warming, the warm temperature, but they always, when they breed, When they swarm, they come in the young baby and they always come in for safety. Come into the shallow place for safety. If not, they stay out there. They ain't gonna survive out there.
The predators. Ocean recreation and harvesting was managed by the ancient kapu system. Seasons and ceremonies prioritized this serious role in food sustainability and community well-being.
I think it's a Hawaiian way of thinking to understand that what's happening in the sea is what's happening in the land, and they kind of reflect each other. That's why we have plants that have the same names as fishes, as limu, as other things in the sea. So I think our kupuna understood that if there's disturbances that are happening on the land, there's going to be disturbances that happen in the kai, in the ocean. So as we continue to allow people to come in, we keep bumping up tourism without educating properly about the ways of our kupuna, the understandings and iki of our kupuna for this land, and understand how to work with this land. Then we're going to see those decreases in populations of ʻōpelu, of aku, for example, as well as the most important resources to our island, which are these coral reefs and the koa, which really feed those systems of ʻōpelu and feed those systems of aku. So, you know, it's not something I think we can stop completely, tourism and people coming to move here, but if we just make it high importance to teach and educate them what is proper practice here in Hawaii, how do we maintain the land, how do we maintain our fisheries, how do we maintain our ʻōpelu and aku, to allow us to continue to live here in these islands. Because if things keep going on the way they're going now, and our resources continue to get depleted and depleted, eventually it's going to be an inhospitable land over here. So I think that's something we got to work towards.
Our government imposed regulations aligned with traditional knowledge and customary practices. For example, the Marine Life Conservation District at Kealakekua Bay imposes a no-take zone based on Western methods of data collecting.
I think the answer is right there in the question. It's those Western methods of data collection don't apply in the same way as our kupuna's ike was. We're challenging knowledge that's maybe a couple decades, maybe a couple centuries old, compared to thousands of years of, 1,000, 2,000 years of knowledge here in Hawaii about how to maintain these fisheries and how to maintain our land resources. So I think some of the frustrations that our people are meeting is that other people, maybe those who are applying for permits, maybe those who are working commercially, are able to fish and take as much as they like at seasons that aren't really the optimal season for some of our fisheries, while our kanaka are having a hard time just fishing and feeding their families. And these people might have a little more knowledge of how our kupuna used to fish and care for these lands. So I think the departments and the state departments, the federal departments need to really acknowledge and understand the traditional ike and use that as a foundation for how they regulate and how they mandate laws in relation to fisheries, as well as into land practices and other things like that.
We need to protect the bays and stuff for them to come in. Wait to the bigger size. When they get bigger size, then they go back out.
I think one thing Native Hawaiians can do is have a voice. I think that's something that we've been taught for generations and generations ever since the overthrow of the kingdom, is to have a voice, to make yourself heard and acknowledge that you're here and you're an importance to this community. I think our Native people need to come together on ideas and work together on ideas as opposed to pushing away each other, because that's not how our communities worked in the past. It's worked by, laulima, it's worked by aloha aina, malama aina, and alulike. So I think our people just need to come together a little bit more, talk and understand each other's problems, and even look out to see what other people's problems are, because they may be the same problems that we're having, and maybe they've solved them already, and maybe we need to just listen out and see what we can get from them and then work together.
What can Native Hawaiians do? Communities are reverting back to the ohana system, where the community is once again gathering as a family to strengthen their ties to the traditions and practices of their land. The Makahiki Ohana Day celebration is a way the community can engage in the revival by allowing individuals to connect to traditions, philosophies, and ceremonies that speak of their land, their heritage, and their resources. And although it is a time of celebration, it is also a reminder for us today of the work that is needed to keep the ancestral knowledge alive. Ehu, a call to action, returns us to the pule, to the prayer, the ceremony. The fish and their cycles of life are in danger, and a return to our ancestral philosophies of sustainability is our only hope. Today, the descendants of the ancient ones continue to petition the ancestral deities and inspire their community to return to the wisdom of their ancestors. And, despite the 200 plus years of suppression, the community of Kealakekua Bay was brought together to restore traditions, festivities, and the Ike Papa Lua, the insightful ancestral worldview, through its annual Makahiki Ohana Day at Hikiau. Restoring traditions and the sacred is a priority to improving the conditions of the cultural and natural resources, and more importantly, prioritizing our way of life.